She held the clock between two fingers like it was something rotting. She looked around the room to make sure every single person was watching, and then she said it loud enough to echo off the marble floor. Cheap junk from a garage. Then she let it fall. 4 months. That is how long it took me to build that clock. 4 months of waking up at 5 in the morning, walking barefoot across the cold workshop floor, and sitting at the same bench where I had spent the last 41 years of my life making things with my hands. 4 months of choosing the right grain of mahogany, sanding it down until the surface felt like water under my fingertips, fitting each gear into its place the way my father taught me and his father taught him. I carved the face myself. I tuned the chime by ear. I set a tiny music mechanism inside the base, a little device no bigger than a matchbox that played the first 8 bars of Clair de Lune. That was the song Rosalind used to play on the piano every Sunday morning while the coffee was still brewing and the light was just barely coming through the kitchen window. Our son Nathan learned his first notes on that song. He was 4 years old, sitting on her lap, pressing the keys with one finger while she guided his hand and hummed along. That is what was inside the clock, and Jordyn dropped it on the floor like it was a piece of trash she had found stuck to the bottom of her shoe. I need to tell you what happened. All of it. But I need to start here, because this is the moment that changed everything. Not what I found later. Not what Rosalind left behind. This moment. Christmas Eve, 7:42 in the evening, 23 people in my living room. The tree was lit. The fire was going, and my daughter-in-law stood in the center of it all, holding my gift like it was an insult, and made sure every single person in that room heard what she thought of me. My name is Edwin Mercer. I am 65 years old. I live in Savannah, Georgia, in the same house on Abercorn Street that Rosalind and I bought 37 years ago, back when the shutters were falling off and the porch leaned so far to the left that the mailman used to joke he needed a level just to deliver our letters. I fixed every board in that house with my own hands. I am a clockmaker. I have been a clockmaker since I was 23 years old, and before that, I was a woodworker, and before that I was a boy who could not sit still unless someone put a chisel in my hand and pointed me toward a piece of oak. My wife used to say that I spoke better with wood than I ever did with words, and she was probably right about that. Rosalind passed away 2 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. She fought it for 14 months. And she never once complained, and on the last morning she held my hand and told me to keep making things because that was how I loved people. And she did not want me to stop loving people just because she was gone. I promised her I would not stop. The clock was my promise kept. I made it for the family. For Nathan and Jordyn, and especially for my granddaughter Ellie, who is 8 years old, and who used to sit in my workshop on a little stool and watch me work, and ask me questions like, "Grandpa, why does the wood smell like that? And Grandpa, how do the gears know when to turn? And Grandpa, can you make me a bee? Tiny one that fits in my pocket." That girl has more curiosity in her little finger than most people carry in their whole lives. The clock was meant to sit on the mantel in Nathan and Jordyn's home. It was meant to chime on the hour and play those first 8 bars of Clair de Lune, and maybe, just maybe, make Nathan remember what it sounded like when his mother played it for him when he was small. That was the whole point. Not money, not status, not whatever Jordyn thought a gift was supposed to look like. Just memory, just love, just a man in his workshop, trying to keep a promise to his dead wife. But you need to understand something about Jordyn, and I say this without anger, because anger is something I ran out of a long time ago, and what I have left is just clarity. Jordyn does not see gifts. She sees price tags. She does not hear music. She hears what things cost. And when she held up my clock and looked at it under the chandelier light, and turned it over to check for a brand name that was not there, she made a decision. She decided that this thing I had made with my own hands, this thing that carried my wife's song inside it, was not worth her respect. Cheap junk from a garage. I watched it fall. I watched it hit the marble floor. I heard the mahogany crack. I heard the gears scatter, like tiny silver teeth across the stone, and I heard the music mechanism snap, and the first two notes of Clair de Lune sounded once, broken and sharp, like a bird hitting a window. And then there was nothing. 23 people in that room, and nobody moved. Nobody said a word. Nathan stared at the floor. Jordyn brushed her hands together like she had just taken out the recycling, and my granddaughter Ellie, who was sitting on the bottom stair in her red Christmas dress with her chin resting on her knees, looked up at me with those wide brown eyes, and I could see her lips moving but no sound coming out at first. Then she whispered it. So quiet that I was the only one who heard. I thought it was beautiful, Grandpa, and I just sat there, smiling, because she had absolutely no idea. None of them did. They did not know that my late wife had left 3 cassette tapes hidden inside an old piano bench. And the first one was labeled in Rosalind's handwriting, in that perfect slanted cursive she used for everything important. When she finally shows who she really is. The room smelled like pine and cinnamon. Rosalind's recipe. Every Christmas she would simmer a pot of water on the stove with cinnamon sticks, orange peel, and a few drops of vanilla, and the whole house would fill up with it like a warm blanket you could breathe. I kept the tradition going after she passed because Ellie asked me to, and because some things are too important to let die just because the person who started them is gone. 23 people in that room and not one of them breathed. I could hear the fire popping in the fireplace. I could hear ice shifting in someone's glass. I could hear the grandfather clock in the hallway, the one I built in 1994, still ticking steady and patient, like it had no opinion about what just happened. And on the floor between Jordyn's feet, my clock lay in pieces. The mahogany shell had cracked clean down the middle. 3 gears had rolled under the coffee table. The glass face was shattered into a dozen pieces that caught the Christmas tree light and threw tiny rainbows across the marble, and I remember thinking how strange it was that something broken could still make something beautiful. Jordyn did not look down. She never looked down. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, straightened her shoulders, and smiled at the room like she had just done everyone a favor. "Does anyone want more wine?" she said. That was it. She had just destroyed 4 months of my life. The last song my wife ever loved. A gift I made with hands that ache every morning from arthritis I will never admit to. And her next sentence was about wine. I looked at Nathan. My son was standing near the bookshelf with his hands in his pockets and his jaw tight, and his eyes fixed on the floor about 2 feet left of the broken clock. He would not look at me. He would not look at Jordyn. He just stood there frozen, like a man who had practiced being invisible for so long that he had almost succeeded. Nathan is 33 years old. He has his mother's eyes, dark brown with flecks of gold that catch the light when he laughs, except he does not laugh much anymore. He married Jordyn 4 years ago. Rosalind was already sick by then. But she came to the wedding and danced with Nathan to that old Sam Cooke song and whispered something in his ear that made him cry. I never found out what she said, but I am getting ahead of myself. The room started to move again. Slowly, Jordyn's friend Monica picked up a plate of cookies and offered them around like nothing had happened. My neighbor Cordelia, who is 74 years old and has never held back an opinion in her life, opened her mouth, but I caught her eye and shook my head. Not now. Not here. She pressed her lips together so hard they turned white. But she stayed quiet. Someone turned the music back up, Bing Crosby singing White Christmas through the ceiling speakers Rosalind had installed because she said music should come from above like rain. I got down on one knee. Slowly, because the cold makes my joints stiff. I started picking up the pieces. The gears first, small and silver and precise, each one cut and filed to fit exactly where it belonged and nowhere else. Then the glass. I placed each piece in my palm and then into my vest pocket, and I could feel the sharp edges pressing through the fabric against my chest, and I did not mind. That is when I saw Jordyn's face change. She was watching me from across the room with a glass of red wine in her hand, mid-sentence about a resort in Cancun, and then her eyes landed on me kneeling on the floor, picking up the pieces of her mess, and something shifted. Half a second. Maybe less. But I have spent 41 years reading The Grain of Wood, learning how a tiny crack tells you everything about what is happening inside. And I can read a face the same way. It was not guilt. Jordyn does not do guilt. It was fear. She was afraid of what I might do next. And she was right to be afraid. But not for the reasons she thought. She thought I might make a scene, say something loud, give her a reason to call me unstable. That was what she wanted. I know that now. I did not know it then. But I felt it the way you feel, a storm coming before you see the clouds. I did not give her what she wanted. I picked up every piece, stood up, walked to the kitchen, and set the broken clock on the counter next to the sink. I washed my hands. I dried them on the dish towel with the little red cardinals that Rosalind bought at a craft fair in Tybee Island the summer before she got sick. Then I went back and smiled and shook hands and kissed Ellie on the forehead when she came to hold my hand without saying a word. The party ended at 11:15. People left in small groups, squeezing my arm a little harder than usual because they did not know what else to do. Cordelia was the last to leave. She stood on the porch with those sharp blue eyes and said, "Edwin Mercer, you are a better man than that woman deserves. And if you need anything, you call me." I told her I would. I closed the door, locked it, turned off the tree, stood in the quiet of my living room with cinnamon still in the air and the embers turning from orange to gray. Then I walked down the hallway, past the grandfather clock, past the family photos, past the bedroom Rosalind, and I shared for 36 years, all the way to the back room where she kept her piano. I had not opened that piano bench in 2 years. Tonight I was going to open it. The piano was a 1968 Baldwin upright. Dark walnut. Rosalind found it at an estate sale in Beaufort the year Nathan was born, and I spent 3 weekends restoring it. New hammers, new strings, a full retuning that took me 11 hours because I am not a piano man. But I am a man who does not quit until the thing in front of me sounds the way it is supposed to sound. Rosalind cried when she played it for the first time. She sat down on the bench and put her fingers on the keys and played Claire de Lune from memory. And the notes filled the house like something that had been waiting a long time to be let out. The bench was simple. I built it myself. Cherry wood, with a hinged top, and a felt-lined compartment inside where Rosalind kept her sheet music. Chopin, Debussy, a few hymns she played at church, and a folder of Nathan's early drawings that she could not bring herself to throw away. Stick figures with enormous heads and suns, with smiley faces, and one that said, "I love you, Mommy," in backwards letters. She kept everything. That was who Rosalind was. She kept everything that mattered, and she put it somewhere safe. And she trusted that the right person would find it at the right time. I sat down on the bench. The room was dark, except for the streetlight coming through the window, and the faint glow from the hallway. I could smell her in this room. Not perfume. Rosalind never wore perfume. It was something else. Something that lived in the wood and the fabric and the air itself. Something I could never name but would recognize anywhere. I lifted the lid. The sheet music was still there. The drawings were still there. But underneath them, pressed flat against the bottom of the compartment, were 3 things that had not been there the last time I looked, which was the week after her funeral when I came in here to close the piano, and told myself I would not open it again until I was ready. 3 cassette tapes, each one in a clear plastic case, each one labeled in Rosalind's handwriting, that perfect, slanted cursive she used for everything important. Birthday cards, grocery lists, love notes she used to leave in my toolbox when I was not looking. I would know her handwriting in a room full of 1,000 pages. The first tape said, "When she finally shows who she really is." The second tape said, "For the courtroom." The third tape said, "Play this one last, my love." My hands were shaking. I need you to understand that I am not a man who shakes. I have held a chisel steady for 6 hours straight. I have cut dovetail joints, thinner than a playing card, without flinching. But sitting on that bench in the dark, holding those 3 tapes with my dead wife's handwriting on them, my hands shook like I was 20 years old again, and asking her father for permission to marry her. She knew. That was the first thing that hit me. Rosalind knew. She knew about Jordyn. She knew what Jordyn was. She knew before I did, before Nathan did, before anyone in this family had the courage to say it out loud. And she did not just know. She prepared. She sat in this room, probably while I was out in the workshop building something, and she recorded these tapes and labeled them and hid them in the one place she knew I would eventually come back to, the piano bench, because she knew I could not stay away from her music forever. I went to the kitchen. I opened the junk drawer next to the refrigerator, the one Rosalind always told me to clean out, and I never did. And I dug around until I found the old cassette player. It was a Sony, silver, the size of a paperback book. I bought it in 1989. The batteries were dead, so I plugged it into the wall outlet next to the toaster, and I put the first tape in, and I pressed play. There was static for about 5 seconds. Then a breath. Then her voice. "Edwin, if you are listening to this." Then she has made her move. I do not know exactly what she did, but I know it was something cruel, and I know it was something public, because that is how women like her operate. They need an audience. They need people to see you as small so they can feel big. I am sorry you had to go through that, sweetheart. I wish I could be there. I wish I could hold your hand right now and tell you it is going to be all right. But since I cannot, I am going to do the next best thing. I am going to tell you what I know. And I am going to tell you what to do. And I need you to trust me the way you always have. I stood in my kitchen at 11:47 on Christmas night, with the lights off and the cassette player on the counter humming softly, and my wife's voice filling the room like she had never left. And I cried. I cried the way I did not let myself cry at her funeral. I cried the way I did not cry when they lowered her casket into the ground. I cried, standing up with my hands on the edge of the counter, and my head bowed, and my whole body shaking because the woman I loved had reached across death to protect me, and I did not even know it until now. The tape kept playing. Rosalind's voice was calm and steady, the way it always was when she had made up her mind about something. "First thing tomorrow morning," she said, "I need you to call a woman named Claudette Fontenot. She is an attorney in Savannah. I hired her 14 months ago. She has a file with your name on it, and she is waiting for your call. Tell her the clock is broken. She will know what it means." The tape did not stop. Rosalind kept talking like she had rehearsed every word, like she had sat at the kitchen table with a notepad and written it all out before she pressed record. And knowing her, she probably did. Rosalind never said anything by accident. Every sentence had a purpose. The same way every note in Claire de Lune had a purpose. And if you were patient enough to listen, you would hear exactly what she meant. "Edwin," she said, "I need to tell you some things about Jordyn that you are not going to want to hear. And I need you to listen to all of it before you react. Can you do that for me? I know you can. You are the most patient man I have ever known. You waited 9 months to finish that grandfather clock in the hallway because one gear was not sitting right, and you refused to move on until it was perfect. So sit down and be patient with me now." I sat down. Right there on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet and the cassette player on the counter above me, her voice floating down like she was standing right there. "Jordyn has been moving money out of your accounts," she said. "I do not have exact numbers because I only started noticing 7 months ago. But it is significant. She has access to the joint credit card you gave Nathan when he got married. And she has been using it for things that have nothing to do with your son or your granddaughter. I found receipts in her car when she asked me to grab her sunglasses one afternoon. Designer bags, spa treatments, a deposit on a vacation rental in the Keys that Nathan told me he knew nothing about when I asked him carefully. She is spending your money, Edwin. And she is doing it in a way that is designed to look normal. Until you add it all up." I sat on that floor, and I felt something cold move through my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Something quieter than anger. Something that sits underneath it, and holds it up like the foundation under a house. Betrayal. The slow kind. The kind that has been happening for months or years while you were busy trusting people because that is what decent people do, Rosalind continued. I also need to tell you about her mother. Her name is Margot Price, and she is not who she says she is. She told us she was a retired real estate agent from Baton Rouge. That is only half true. I asked my friend Patrice to look into her, because something about that woman made my skin crawl from the first day I met her. And Patrice found court records from Louisiana. 2011. Margot Price was convicted of financial exploitation of an elderly person, a man named Raymond Fenton. She took $380,000 from him over 2 years. She did time. Edwin. She served and was released, and she moved to Georgia, and she changed nothing except her zip code. The tape hissed for a moment. I could hear Rosalind take a breath. A long one. The kind she used to take before she told me something she knew would change the shape of my day. Now here is the part I need you to really hear, she said. I do not think Jordyn is acting alone. I think Margot taught her. I think this is what they do. I think they find men like you. Good men. Men who work hard, and save, and build something with their hands, and trust their families. And they take it apart from the inside. Piece by piece. So quiet you do not even hear the gears coming loose until the whole thing stops working. She used my language. Gears. Pieces. Things coming loose. She knew exactly how to talk to me so I would not just hear it but feel it in the part of my brain that understands how things are built and how they fall apart. The tape played for another 4 minutes. Rosalind laid out everything she had done. She had contacted Claudette Fontenot, an elder law attorney in Savannah, 14 months before she died. She had given Claudette copies of the credit card statements she had gathered. She had asked Claudette to prepare documents to convert my revocable trust into an irrevocable trust, which would lock down the house and my savings and my workshop and everything I had built over 40 years so that no one could touch it without my written consent. She had also asked Claudette to prepare a file on Margot Price, including the Louisiana conviction, in case it was ever needed in court. All of this sitting in a drawer in Claudette's office. Waiting. Ready. Like a clock wound tight and set to the right time. Just waiting for the alarm to ring. Rosalind built this like a blueprint, I whispered to myself in the dark kitchen. She planned this the way I plan a build. Measure everything. Cut once. Leave nothing to chance. The last thing on the tape was the hardest to hear. I love you, Edwin. I love you more than I know how to say on a tape. And I am sorry I could not tell you this face to face. I was afraid that if I told you while I was still alive, you would confront Jordyn and it would blow up, and Nathan would get caught in the middle, and Ellie would pay the price. So I waited. I put everything in place, and I waited. And I trusted that when the time came, you would find these tapes, and you would know what to do. Trust yourself, sweetheart. You have always known how to fix what is broken. This is no different. Call Claudette. Tell her the clock is broken, and then let her help you build something they cannot break. The tape clicked. The player stopped. The kitchen was silent. I sat on the floor for a long time. I do not know how long. Long enough for the streetlight outside to flicker twice and come back on. Then I stood up. I walked to the phone on the wall. The old rotary phone Rosalind insisted we keep, because she said some things should not be replaced just because something newer exists. I dialed the number Rosalind had written on the inside of the cassette case in that same slanted cursive. It rang 4 times. A woman answered. Her voice was low and steady, and wide awake for midnight on Christmas. This is Claudette Fontenot, she said. I took a breath. The clock is broken, I said. There was a pause. 2 seconds. Maybe 3. Then Claudette spoke, and her voice had the quiet weight of someone who had been waiting a very long time for exactly this phone call. I know, Mr. Mercer. Your wife told me you would call. I have everything ready. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning at 9? I did not sleep that night. I sat in the living room in the dark with the cassette player on the table beside me, and Rosalind's voice still ringing in my head like a bell that had been struck and would not stop vibrating. The Christmas tree was off, but the ornaments still caught the streetlight through the window. Little flashes of gold and red floating in the darkness like memories trying to get my attention. At 12:47 I heard the front door open. I did not move. I knew the sound of that door better than I knew my own heartbeat. The left hinge had a slight creak. I had never fixed, because Rosalind said she liked it. She said it told her someone she loved was coming home. I sat still in the dark and listened to the footsteps in the hallway. Slow and careful. The steps of someone trying not to be heard. Nathan appeared in the living room doorway. He was still wearing his shirt from the party, but the collar was unbuttoned and his sleeves were rolled up and his hair was pushed back like he had been running his hands through it for the last hour. He did not see me at first. He took 2 steps into the room and then stopped because he felt it. The way you feel someone watching you in a dark room, even when you cannot see them. "Dad," he said. "I am here," I said. He stood there for a long time. I could hear him breathing. Quick, shallow breaths, like a man who had been running uphill and could not catch enough air. Then he walked to the couch and sat down across from me and put his face in his hands, and his shoulders started shaking and he cried. Not loud. Not dramatic. The quiet kind of crying that men do when they have been holding something for so long that when it finally breaks loose, it does not come out as a sound. It comes out as a trembling that starts in the chest and moves through the whole body like an earthquake that only registers on the inside. I let him cry. I did not say a word. I have learned in 65 years of living that sometimes the most important thing you can do for someone is to sit in the dark with them and not try to fix it. Not yet. Just be there. Just let them know the room is not empty. It took him a long time to speak. When he finally did, his voice was raw and cracked at the edges, like dry wood splitting in the cold. "I know what she has been doing, Dad. I have known for a long time." I waited. The credit cards. The spending. The way she talks to you when no one else is around. I have heard it. I have heard all of it. And I did not do anything because I was scared. I was scared she would take Ellie. She told me she would take Ellie. She told me if I ever said a word to you, or to anyone, she would file for full custody, and she would make sure I never saw my daughter again, and I believed her because she said it the way someone says something they have already planned. Nathan looked up. His eyes were red and swollen, and the gold flecks that came from his mother were buried under so much pain that I almost could not find them. "I am sorry," he said. "I am so sorry, Dad. I should have told you. I should have told Mom. I should have done something a long time ago, but I was a coward. And I let her do this to you. And I will never forgive myself for that." I leaned forward. I put my hand on his knee. I could feel him shaking under my palm. "You are not a coward," I said. "You are a father who was trying to protect his daughter. There is no shame in that. Your mother would tell you the same thing if she were here." He broke again when I said that. He bent forward and grabbed my hand and held it against his forehead and cried into my knuckles, and I could feel his tears running between my fingers and dripping onto the carpet. I sat there and held my son's head the way I used to hold it when he was a little boy and had nightmares about the dark. Some things do not change. A father's hand on his child's head means the same thing at 33 as it does at 3. "I am here. You are safe. We are going to figure this out." When he finally sat up, he wiped his face with the back of his hand and took a breath that rattled in his chest. Then he reached into his back pocket and pulled out a small black USB drive. He held it out to me in his open palm like it was something fragile and dangerous at the same time. "I started recording her 8 months ago," he said. "Every time she said something about you. Every time she talked on the phone with her mother about the money, or the house, or the plan to get you out of the way. I used my phone. I kept it in my shirt pocket with the microphone facing out, and I just let it run. I did not know what I was going to do with it. I just knew I needed proof, because no one would believe me without proof. She is too good at this, Dad. She is too good at making everyone think she is the good one, and the rest of us are crazy. I took the USB drive from his hand. It was small and light and warm from being in his pocket. I turned it over between my fingers, the way I turn a piece of wood when I am deciding what it wants to become. How many recordings? I asked. Nathan looked at me with those broken gold-brown eyes. 52, he said. I closed my fingers around the drive. 52 recordings. 8 months of his life spent carrying a secret in his shirt pocket, walking through his own house like a spy, protecting his daughter while gathering evidence against his wife. My son, my quiet, careful, terrified son. He had been building something too. Not with wood, not with gears, but with the only tool he had left, the truth. We sat at the kitchen table the next morning with 2 cups of black coffee and my laptop between us. Nathan plugged the USB drive in and a folder opened on the screen. 52 audio files, each one named with a date and a time. The oldest was from 5 months before Christmas. The newest was from 3 days ago. I looked at Nathan. He had not slept either. His eyes were swollen, and there were shadows under them that made him look 10 years older than 33. He nodded once. Go ahead. I clicked the first file. Jordyn's voice filled the kitchen. Clear and sharp and completely different from the voice she used at dinner parties and family gatherings. This was the real voice, the one she used when she thought no one important was listening. He does not even know what he has, she said. He sits in that little workshop all day playing with wood like a child, and meanwhile there is a house worth $800,000 and a trust fund and savings accounts he has not touched in years. It is sitting there, Mom. It is just sitting there, and all we have to do is wait for the right moment. Then Margot's voice. Lower. Slower. Patient. The way a teacher is patient with a student who is almost ready for the final exam. Do not rush it. I have told you this. You rush it and the whole thing falls apart. Let him get older. Let him get slower. Let him start forgetting things. And then we move. One step at a time. The same way I did it with Raymond. Raymond. She said his name like it was a recipe she had memorized. Raymond Fenton. The man in Louisiana. $380,000. Rosalind had told me about him on the cassette, and now here was Margot's own voice, confirming it like she was proud of it, like it was a job well done. I played the next file. And the next. And the next. In recording number 7, Jordyn called me a stubborn old fool who would not know a good investment if it hit him in the head. In recording 12, she told Margot that she had found a way to add herself to one of my credit card accounts without me noticing. In recording 19, she laughed about the time I made Ellie a dollhouse for her birthday and said it looked like something from a flea market, and she wished I would just give the kid cash like a normal person. In recording 26, she told Nathan to his face that if he ever breathed a word to me, she would take Ellie to her mother's house in Baton Rouge, and he would spend the next 10 years in family court trying to get her back. I heard the threat in her voice when she said it. Flat and final like a door closing. And I heard what Nathan did not say in response. Silence. The silence of a man standing in his own kitchen, being held hostage by the woman he married. We listened to all 52 recordings over the course of 4 hours. Nathan sat across from me the whole time with his hands wrapped around his coffee mug, even though the coffee went cold in the first 30 minutes. Sometimes he would close his eyes. Sometimes he would look at the ceiling. Once he stood up and walked to the sink and stood there with his hands on the counter and his head down, and I thought he might be sick, but he just stood there breathing until he could sit back down. When the last recording ended, the kitchen was quiet. The laptop screen glowed blue. Outside the window, I could see the live oak in the backyard. The one Rosalind planted the year we moved in. Its branches heavy with Spanish moss that moved in the morning breeze like gray curtains in a slow dream. Nathan spoke first. What do we do now? He said. I closed the laptop. I looked at my son, and I saw something in his face that had not been there the night before. The fear was still there. It would take a long time for the fear to go away completely. But underneath it, pushing up through the cracks like the first green shoot in a sidewalk, there was something else. Anger. The good kind. The kind that does not burn hot and reckless, but sits low and steady like a coal that has been glowing for months and is finally ready to be used. We call Claudette, I said. We bring her everything. The cassette, the USB, every credit card statement we can find. And we do exactly what your mother said. We build something they cannot break. Nathan nodded. Then he said something that made me stop. There is one more thing, Dad. I found a note in Jordyn's purse last night when I went back to the house to get my jacket. It is about a brunch. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and slid it across the table. I unfolded it. It was a handwritten list in Jordyn's writing, tight and controlled. Nothing like Rosalind's graceful cursive. At the top it said New Year's Day brunch, Edwin's house. Below that was a list of names. People from the neighborhood, people from church, Nathan's co-workers. And at the bottom, underlined twice, a note that said, "Bring the brochure. Make sure everyone sees it." I did not know what brochure she meant. Not yet. But I could feel it the way I feel a crack in a piece of wood before I can see it. Something was coming. Something she had been planning for longer than Christmas. Something that was supposed to happen in front of an audience, because Rosalind was right about that. Jordyn always needed an audience. New Year's Day was 6 days away. Whatever she was bringing, I was going to be ready for it. New Year's Day came fast. The week between Christmas and the 1st of January moved the way water moves under ice, slow on the surface but rushing underneath where no one can see it. I spent those 6 days doing two things: building and planning. In the mornings I was in Claudette's office, going through credit card statements and signing documents. In the afternoons I was in my workshop with the door locked, not building anything yet, just sitting at my bench and thinking the way I think before I start a project. Measuring the problem, studying the grain, figuring out where the weak points are before I make the first cut. Claudette had already begun the process of converting my revocable trust into an irrevocable one. She explained it to me in plain language. A revocable trust is like a door with a lock that anyone with a key can open. An irrevocable trust is like a door that has been sealed shut with the key melted down and thrown into the river. Once it is done, no one can touch what is inside. Not Jordyn, not Margot, not a judge, not anyone. My house, my savings, my workshop, my land, everything I had spent 40 years building would be locked behind a wall that no charm or scheme or lawyer's trick could get through. I also asked Claudette to pull the full financial records on the joint credit card. She had a forensic accountant on her team, a quiet man named Douglas who wore reading glasses on a chain around his neck and spoke in numbers the way I speak in measurements. Douglas went through 18 months of statements and came back with a number that made me sit down: $52,000. That is how much Jordyn had charged to my account over the past year and a half. $52,000 in designer clothing, spa treatments, jewelry, a vacation deposit in the Florida Keys, 2 first-class plane tickets to New York, and a monthly payment to a storage unit in Pooler that I did not know existed. $52,000 taken from a 65-year-old retired clockmaker who lived on savings and Social Security and never spent more than $40 on himself in a single month. I told Claudette about the brunch. I told her about the note. Bring the brochure. Make sure everyone sees it. Claudette leaned back in her chair and pressed her fingertips together and said, "Mr. Mercer, I think I know exactly what that brochure is going to be. Let her bring it. Let her say whatever she is going to say. Do not react. Do not argue. Just watch and listen, and let me worry about the rest." So I did. New Year's Day, 11 o'clock in the morning. The house was full again. Not as full as Christmas, but close. 14 people, including Cordelia, who arrived early and planted herself in the corner of the living room like a sentry. Nathan came with Ellie. Ellie was wearing a yellow dress with white flowers, and she ran straight to me and grabbed my legs and said, "Happy New Year, Grandpa. I missed you so much." I picked her up and held her and smelled her hair, strawberry shampoo and something sweet like maple syrup, and I thought, this is what matters. This. Not the money, not the house. This girl in my arms. This is what I am protecting. Jordyn arrived 15 minutes late. She walked in wearing a white coat and heels that clicked on the hardwood like a metronome counting down to something. She was carrying a dish of fruit salad in one hand and a large cream-colored envelope in the other. She smiled at everyone the way she always did, wide and bright, and completely convincing if you did not know what was underneath. The brunch went smoothly for the first hour. People ate. People talked. Someone told a story about a fishing trip on the Savannah River that made everyone laugh. I watched Jordyn from across the room. She was working her way through the guests one by one, touching their arms, leaning in close, laughing at their jokes. Building trust. Building an audience. Rosalind was right. She always needed an audience. At 12:15, Jordyn set down her glass of sparkling water and picked up the cream-colored envelope and walked to the center of the living room. She cleared her throat the same way she had cleared it on Christmas Eve before she dropped my clock, and the room went quiet. "I have been thinking a lot about family lately," she said. "About what it means to take care of the people we love. And I have been worried about someone in this room. Someone I care about deeply." She looked directly at me. "Dad," she said, "I found something I want to share with you. With all of us, really. Because I think it is time we had an honest conversation about the future." She opened the envelope and pulled out a glossy brochure. Full color. Professional photography. She held it up so the whole room could see the cover. There was a picture of a white building surrounded by magnolia trees and a smiling elderly couple sitting on a bench holding hands. Across the top, in elegant green letters, it said, "Blue Magnolia Gardens, luxury assisted living for distinguished seniors." She wanted to put me in a home. That was the plan. That was what the note meant. That was what the brochure was for. She was going to stand in my own living room in front of my friends and my neighbors and my family and suggest with that sweet, concerned voice of hers that I was too old and too confused and too alone to live by myself anymore. And once I was in Blue Magnolia Gardens, the house on Abercorn Street would be empty, and the trust would be accessible, and Jordyn and Margot could take apart everything I had built piece by piece without me there to stop them. I looked at Cordelia. Her jaw was set so tight, I could see the muscles in her neck. I looked at Nathan. He was standing by the window holding Ellie's hand, and his face was pale, but his eyes were steady, and I could see him breathing slow and deliberate the way I had taught him to breathe when he was a boy and got scared during the terrace. Thunderstorms. I looked at Jordyn. She was smiling, and I did exactly what Claudette told me to do. I did not react. I did not argue. I just watched and listened and waited, because she had no idea what was already in motion. The brunch ended the way these things always end, when someone drops a grenade in the middle of a room full of polite people. Slowly, awkwardly, with too many goodbyes and not enough eye contact. Jordyn spent the last 20 minutes walking guests to the door and handing out copies of the Blue Magnolia Gardens brochure like party favors. Some people took them. Some pretended they did not see her hand. Cordelia walked past her without a word and squeezed my arm on the way out. And I could feel in that squeeze everything she wanted to say, but did not. Nathan left with Jordyn. He had to. Ellie was with them. And wherever Ellie went, Nathan went because that was the unspoken rule of their house. Jordyn controlled the doors and Nathan walked through whichever one she opened. But before they left, while Jordyn was in the kitchen wrapping up her fruit salad and talking on the phone with someone I assumed was Margot, Ellie came to me. She was standing in the hallway next to the grandfather clock. Her yellow dress had a small stain on the hem where she had spilled grape juice and tried to wipe it off with her thumb. She was holding a piece of paper folded into a tiny square, the way only children fold things, tight and uneven, with the corners sticking out. "Grandpa," she said. I knelt down. My knees complained, but I did not care. She held out the folded paper. I took it. Then she looked up at me, with those brown eyes that held her grandmother's light in them, and she said something that broke my heart clean in half. "Please do not go away forever, Grandpa. I do not want you to go to that place in the picture. I want you to stay here where the clocks are. Please." I pulled her close. I held her against my chest, and I could feel her small heart beating fast like a sparrow's, and I put my hand on the back of her head, and I said the only thing a grandfather can say in a moment like that. "I am not going anywhere, Ellie. I promise you. I am staying right here." She squeezed my neck so hard it almost hurt. Then Jordyn called her name from the kitchen, sharp and impatient, and Ellie let go and ran down the hall without looking back. I stood up and watched her go, and I held that folded piece of paper in my hand, like it was the most important thing anyone had ever given me. I opened it later that night, sitting at my workbench. It was a drawing, crayon on lined paper. A man with white hair standing next to a tall clock. A little girl, with a yellow dress, holding his hand, and above them, in red crayon, the letters pressed so hard, they had almost torn through the paper. 2 words. My grandpa. I pinned it to the wall above my bench. It is still there. The next morning I drove to Claudette's office on Drayton Street. She had a second-floor office above a bookstore with tall windows that overlooked a courtyard full of azaleas. I sat in the leather chair across from her desk, and I told her everything. The brunch, the brochure, Ellie's words, the folded drawing. Claudette listened without interrupting, which was one of the things I respected most about her. She did not fill silence with noise. She let it sit until it was ready to be used. When I finished, she opened a folder on her desk and turned it toward me. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "I believe Jordyn is going to file a guardianship petition against you within the next 2 to 3 weeks. The brochure was not just a suggestion, it was a test. She wanted to see how you reacted, and she wanted your friends and neighbors to start thinking about you as someone who might need help. That is how these things begin. Not with a legal filing, but with a story. She is building a story about you, and if we do not build a better one, she is going to win." I asked her what we needed to do. 3 things, Claudette said. "First, we finish the irrevocable trust. That gets signed this week. Once it is done, your assets are untouchable. Second, I want you to see a doctor. Not because anything is wrong with you, but because we need a current medical evaluation on file that says you are mentally competent and fully capable of managing your own affairs. I have someone in mind. His name is Dr. Marsh. He is an independent geriatric specialist. No connection to you, no connection to Jordyn, no connection to anyone. His evaluation will carry weight in court." "And the third thing?" I asked. Claudette leaned forward. Her eyes were dark and steady behind her reading glasses, and she spoke with the kind of quiet certainty that comes from years of fighting battles most people do not even know are happening. "The third thing," she said, "is we set a trap. Not to hurt her, not to trick her, but to catch her doing exactly what she has been doing all along, except this time with evidence she cannot deny and cannot explain away. Your son's recordings are powerful, but they were made without Jordyn's knowledge, and Georgia is a one-party consent state, so they are admissible, but a judge will want more. A judge will want something physical, something documented, something that shows a pattern of behavior that goes beyond words on a recording." "What kind of trap?" I said. Claudette smiled. It was a small smile. The kind a clockmaker makes when every gear finally clicks into place. "You are a man who builds things, Mr. Mercer. So let us build something. Something she will not be able to resist. Something that will tell us exactly who she is and exactly what she wants. And when she reaches for it, we will have everything we need." I sat in that leather chair, and I looked at the azaleas through the window, and I thought about Ellie's drawing pinned to my workbench wall. My grandpa. 2 words. Red crayon. The most important commission I had ever received. I looked at Claudette, and I said, "Tell me what to build." The next 5 days moved like a machine I had wound tight and set loose. Every morning I woke at 5, made coffee, and drove to Claudette's office before the sun was fully up. Every afternoon I came home and sat at my workbench, and worked on what Claudette had asked me to build. And every night, I lay in bed and listened to one of Nathan's 52 recordings, memorizing the details, the way I memorize the measurements of a build, so that when the time comes, my hands know what to do without my brain having to tell them. On January 2nd, Claudette and I signed the final documents converting my revocable trust to an irrevocable trust. She had a notary in her office, a woman named Gail who stamped each page with the kind of careful precision I appreciated. When it was done, Claudette put the documents in a fireproof safe behind her desk and looked at me and said, "Your house, your savings, your workshop, your land, all of it is now behind a wall that no one in this country can get through without your written consent and the approval of a court." Jordyn could hire every lawyer in the state of Georgia, and she would not move a single dollar out of that trust. First door locked. On January 3rd, I saw Dr. Marsh. His office was on Bull Street in a brick building, with ivy growing up the side and a waiting room that smelled like lemon and old paper. He was a tall, quiet man in his 60s with gray hair and steady hands and a way of asking questions that made you feel like he was genuinely interested in the answers. He spent 3 hours with me. Memory tests, cognitive evaluations, physical examination. He asked me to name the presidents in reverse order, and I got all the way back to Eisenhower without pausing. He asked me to draw a clock face from memory, and I almost laughed because I could draw a clock face in my sleep with my eyes closed and one hand behind my back. When we were finished, he sat across from me and said, "Mr. Mercer, you are in excellent cognitive and physical health for a man of any age, and I will have my full written evaluation ready for your attorney by Friday." Second door locked. On January 4th, Douglas, the forensic accountant, delivered his final report to Claudette's office. 18 months of credit card statements organized by date and category. $52,000 broken down into 412 individual transactions. Every purchase documented. Every receipt that existed matched to a statement. Every gap in receipts flagged as a potential cash withdrawal. Douglas had also traced the monthly payments to the storage unit in Pooler and discovered that the unit was registered under a name I did not recognize, Linda Marsh. Claudette checked the name and found that Linda Marsh was an alias Margot Price had used in 2008 on a rental application in Baton Rouge, 3 years before her conviction. The same name, the same woman, the same pattern. Third door locked. On January 5th, I called the credit card company. I told them I wanted to freeze all authorized user access on my account, effective immediately. The representative asked me to confirm my identity, and I gave her my social security number and my mother's maiden name and the answer to the security question Rosalind had set up years ago, which was, "What is the name of the first song you danced to at your wedding?" The answer was, "Wonderful Tonight" by Eric Clapton. The representative processed the freeze and told me that any attempted charges by authorized users would be automatically declined starting at midnight. I thanked her and hung up. Fourth door locked. On January 6th, Claudette filed a formal request with the Chatham County Courthouse to preserve and seal my financial records in the event of any future legal proceedings. She also sent a certified letter to the BMW Financial Services Division requesting a full audit of the lease agreement on the car Jordyn drove, a white BMW that was registered in Nathan's name, but had been co-signed using my credit history without my knowledge. Claudette discovered this when Douglas found monthly lease payments of $640 coming out of an account linked to my social security number. I had never signed a lease agreement for a BMW. I had never authorized anyone to use my credit for a car. But there it was. Page 19 of Douglas's report. $640 a month for 14 months. That was $8,960 on top of the $52,000 in credit card charges. Fifth door locked. On January 7th, I had 2 cameras installed on the exterior of my house on Abercorn Street. Small, discreet. One above the front porch aimed at the walkway and the street. One above the back door aimed at the driveway and the yard. Claudette recommended a security company she had used before, and they sent a technician who mounted them in under an hour and connected them to an app on my phone that let me watch the feeds in real time and stored 90 days of footage on a cloud server that could be accessed by law enforcement with a warrant. Sixth door locked. I stood in my workshop that evening and looked at the list I had written on a piece of scrap wood with a carpenter's pencil. Trust sealed. Medical evaluation complete. Financial records documented and preserved. Credit frozen. BMW lease flagged. Cameras installed. 6 items. 6 locks. Every single one turned and bolted, and there was nothing left on the other side but a hallway with no way out. Claudette called me at 8 that night. I could hear her smiling through the phone. "How does it feel, Mr. Mercer?" she said. I looked around my workshop, at the tools hanging on the wall, at Ellie's drawing, pinned above my bench, at the second clock, sitting on the table under a cloth, almost finished, waiting for its purpose. "It feels like every door in this house is locked," I said. "And she does not have a single key." I started building the second clock on the morning of January 4th and finished it on the evening of January 9th. 6 days. That is fast for me. The first clock took 4 months because it was made with love. This one took 6 days because it was made with purpose. Different fuel. Same hands. I chose cherry wood this time, not mahogany. Cherry has a warmth to it that people trust without knowing why. It glows red in the light like something alive, and when you run your hand across a finished piece of cherry, it feels like touching something that is telling you a secret. That is what I needed. A clock that invited you in. A clock that made you want to pick it up and turn it over and set it on your mantle and forget it was there. The design was simple. A rectangular case 8 inches tall and 5 inches wide, with a round face and Roman numerals I carved by hand. No chime this time. No melody, just a quiet tick that you would stop hearing after the first hour, the way you stop hearing your own heartbeat. On the back panel I routed a small compartment, hidden behind a sliding piece of wood that looked like part of the grain, unless you knew exactly where to press. Inside that compartment I installed 2 things. The first was a GPS tracker the size of a postage stamp. Claudette had given it to me. It transmitted a location signal every 60 seconds to a secure server that Claudette's technical consultant monitored around the clock. Wherever this clock went, I would know. If it moved from Nathan's house to Margot's car, to a storage unit in Pooler, to a pawn shop on Victory Drive, I would know. The second was a micro camera, no bigger than the head of a finishing nail. It was motion activated and stored footage on an internal chip that could hold 72 hours of video before it needed to be retrieved. The lens sat behind a tiny hole I drilled into the back panel and disguised as a natural knot in the cherry wood. You could hold this clock 6 inches from your face, and you would not see it. I made sure of that. I tested it under a magnifying lamp, and even I had to look twice. Every gear has a purpose. That is what my father told me when I was 12 years old, and he put a clockwork mechanism in my hands for the first time. Every gear has a purpose, and if you put a gear in the wrong place, the whole thing stops. But if you put every gear exactly where it belongs, the thing runs so smooth you forget it is a machine at all. It just becomes time. This clock was not about time. Every gear in this clock had one purpose: to catch a thief. On January 10th, I drove to Nathan's house. Jordyn was not home. She was at a hair appointment, Nathan told me, which meant she would be gone for at least 2 hours. I walked into the living room, and I set the cherrywood clock on the mantel above the fireplace, right where the first clock was supposed to go before she broke it on Christmas Eve. Nathan looked at it. Then he looked at me. "Is that what I think it is?" he said. I told him what was inside. His eyes went wide for a moment, and then something settled in his face. A calm I had not seen in him since before he got married. He nodded once and said nothing else. He did not need to. We understood each other the way 2 men understand each other when they have both been hurt by the same storm and are finally building the shelter together. Ellie came running down the stairs when she heard my voice. She stopped in front of the mantel and looked up at the new clock, and her whole face opened up like a flower turning toward the sun. "Grandpa, you made another one," she said. "I did," I said. She reached up on her toes and touched the side of the case with one finger. Gentle. The way she always touched my work. like she understood that someone had put their heart into it. "This one is even more beautiful," she said. I knelt down and kissed her forehead and said, "This one is special, Ellie. This one is going to keep very good time." Jordyn came home at 4:30 that afternoon. Nathan called me at 4:52. "She saw the clock," he said. She picked it up and looked at it and turned it over. And I thought she was going to say something mean, but she did not. She just put it back on the mantel and said, "At least this one does not play that awful song." Then she went upstairs. "Good," I said. "Let her forget it is there." The GPS signal pinged from Nathan's living room every 60 seconds for the next 3 days. The clock did not move. Jordyn walked past it 100 times and never looked at it twice. That was exactly what I wanted. Let it become invisible. Let it become part of the furniture. Let it become background. On January 13th, something else happened. Something I had been waiting for. Nathan called me at 6:15 in the evening. His voice had that edge to it. The tight, controlled sound of a man who is watching something happen and trying not to react. "She just tried to buy something," he said. "Online. A handbag. $3,200. The card was declined." I closed my eyes. I could picture it. Jordyn sitting at her laptop with her coffee and her perfect posture, clicking the purchase button the way she had clicked it 412 times before, and for the first time in 18 months, the screen did not say approved. It said declined. "What did she do?" I asked. Nathan paused. "She tried it again," he said. 3 times. Then she stood up and walked to the kitchen and called her mother. I could not hear what she said, but she was whispering and her hands were shaking and, "Dad, I have never seen her look like that before." "Like what?" I said. "Like someone who just realized the locks have been changed, and she is standing on the wrong side of the door." The BMW disappeared on a Tuesday morning. January 14th. 8:22. I know the exact time because I was watching the camera feed on my phone when the tow truck pulled into Nathan's driveway. It was a white flatbed with the name of the repossession company printed on the side in blue letters. 2 men got out. One had a clipboard. One had a set of wheel dollies. They worked fast and quiet the way professionals do when they have done something 1,000 times and know that speed is the difference between a clean job and a scene. The white BMW was hooked and loaded in under 9 minutes. I watched the whole thing from my kitchen table with a cup of coffee going cold in my hand and the morning light coming through the window. The car rose on the flatbed like something being lifted out of water, and then the truck pulled out of the driveway and turned right on Whitaker Street, and it was gone. Claudette had arranged everything. The BMW lease had been co-signed using my credit without my authorization. That made it fraud. Claudette filed a dispute with BMW Financial Services and provided Douglas's documentation showing that my signature on the lease agreement did not match any known sample of my handwriting. The company launched an internal review, determined the lease was fraudulently obtained, and authorized immediate repossession. Clean. Legal. Documented. Every step recorded in a file that was growing thicker by the day in the fireproof safe behind Claudette's desk. Jordyn found out at 8:41. 19 minutes after the truck left. Nathan told me later that she walked out the front door with her keys in her hand and stopped on the porch and stared at the empty space in the driveway. The way you stare at a hole where something used to be. She stood there for a full minute without moving. Then she turned around and walked back inside, and the screaming started. Nathan did not give me details about what she said during those first few minutes. He did not need to. I had listened to 52 recordings of that voice, and I knew what it sounded like when the mask came off. What he did tell me was that at 9:15 Jordyn got into an Uber and came straight to my house on Abercorn Street. I was in the workshop when I heard the car door slam. I walked to the front window and watched her come up the walkway. She was wearing jeans and a sweatshirt, which I had never seen her wear outside her own house. Her hair was pulled back in a knot, and her face was bare, and her eyes were red, and there was something in the way she moved that reminded me of a clock that has been overwound. All that tension coiled inside with nowhere to go except forward. Fast. And reckless. She did not knock. She pushed the front door open and walked into my living room, and I met her in the hallway. "Where is my car?" she said. "It was not your car." I said, "It was a lease taken out in my name without my permission. It has been repossessed." Her face did something I had never seen before. It went through 3 expressions in about 2 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, and then rage. Pure bright burning rage that turned her cheeks red and made her hands curl into fists at her sides. "You had no right," she said. "That was Nathan's car. That was our car. You cannot just take someone's car." "I can when my name is on the lease and I did not sign it," I said. She opened her mouth and closed it, and opened it again. She was searching for words the way someone searches a dark room for a light switch, slapping the walls, getting more frantic with every second that passes without finding it. That is when Cordelia appeared. My neighbor had been watering her front garden, which I suspect she had been doing for the last 20 minutes for no reason other than she saw Jordyn's Uber pull up and decided she was not going to miss whatever happened next. Cordelia walked to the edge of my porch with her watering can still in her hand and stood there like a woman who had bought a ticket to a show and was not leaving until the curtain came down. Jordyn saw her. She lowered her voice, but it was too late. Cordelia had already heard enough. "You think you are so smart," Jordyn said to me. She was almost whispering now, which was worse than the yelling. The whisper had teeth in it. "You think you can freeze my cards and take my car and lock me out of everything and I am just going to walk away." I did not respond. I stood in my hallway with my hands at my sides, and I looked at her the way I look at a piece of wood that has a crack running through the center. You cannot fix a crack like that. You can only see it clearly and decide what to do with the pieces. "I know what you are doing," she said, "and I know that lawyer put you up to it. But you need to understand something, Edwin. You are 65 years old. You live alone. You talk to wood all day. And when I go to a judge and tell him that you are losing your mind and you need someone to manage your affairs, who do you think he is going to believe? The concerned daughter-in-law or the old man with sawdust in his hair?" She leaned in close enough that I could smell her perfume. Something sharp and expensive that had probably gone on my credit card. "You just started a war," she said. "And you are going to lose." She turned and walked out the door and down the steps past Cordelia, who did not move 1 inch. The Uber was still waiting at the curb. Jordyn got in and slammed the door, and the car pulled away, and the street was quiet again. Cordelia looked at me. "Edwin," she said, "tell me you got that on camera." I looked up at the small device mounted above my porch. The red light was blinking steady and calm the way a heartbeat blinks on a monitor when everything is working exactly the way it should. "Every word," I said. The call came at 9:23 on a Wednesday night, January 15th. I was sitting in my workshop sanding the lid of a small jewelry box I had started making. For no particular reason, other than my hands needed something to do, while my mind worked through the days ahead. The radio was on low. Otis Redding singing "Sittin' on the Dock of the Bay." The sandpaper was moving in long, even strokes across the grain, and I was almost peaceful for the first time in 3 weeks when my phone buzzed on the bench. The screen said Nathan's home. But when I answered, it was not Nathan's voice. "Grandpa, Ellie." Her voice was so small, it barely made it through the phone. Like she was cupping her hand around the receiver and whispering into the space between her fingers. "Ellie, what is wrong?" I said. I put the sandpaper down. My hand was already reaching for my keys. "Mommy is really mad," she said. "She has been yelling all day. She yelled at Daddy, and Daddy went into the bedroom and closed the door, and he will not come out. And then Mommy called someone on the phone, and she was crying and saying bad words. And now she is in the kitchen breaking things. I can hear the plates, Grandpa. She is throwing the plates." I stood up. I could feel my pulse in my temples and my jaw and the tips of my fingers. Every part of me was pulling toward the door. "Where are you right now, Ellie?" I said. I kept my voice level. Calm. The way you talk to a child who is standing at the edge of something they do not understand, and you cannot let them know how scared you are because your fear will become their fear. And that is a weight no 8-year-old should ever have to carry. I am in my room, she said. I locked the door like Daddy showed me. I am sitting in my closet with my blanket and Mr. Buttons. Mr. Buttons was a stuffed rabbit Rosalind had given her on her 5th birthday. Gray corduroy with one ear that flopped to the side because Ellie carried it everywhere and the stitching had come loose. I had offered to fix it twice and both times Ellie said, "No, Grandpa, I like him this way. He looks like he has been on an adventure." My granddaughter was sitting in a closet in the dark holding a stuffed rabbit and listening to her mother throw plates in the kitchen. "Ellie," I said, "I need you to listen to me. You are safe in your room. Keep the door locked. Stay right where you are. I am going to call your daddy on his phone, and we are going to make sure everything is okay. Can you do that for me?" "Yes," she said. Then her voice got even smaller. "Grandpa, I am here," I said. "I am really, really scared." 4 words. Each one landing like a stone dropped into still water. Circles spreading out in every direction, touching everything they reached. I closed my eyes and pressed the phone against my forehead, and I made a promise to myself in that moment that I would burn every clock I had ever built and every piece of wood in my workshop to the ground before I let anything happen to that child. "I will be right there, Ellie," I said. "Do not open your door until you hear Grandpa's voice." "Okay, okay," she whispered. And then she said one more thing before she hung up. "I have Mr. Buttons. He is being brave for me." The line went dead. I called Nathan. He answered on the second ring. His voice was hoarse and flat. The voice of a man who has been standing in a storm for so long he has stopped flinching at the thunder. "I know," he said before I could speak. "She found out about the credit card statements. Claudette sent a formal demand letter to the house today. It was addressed to Jordyn, and it listed every unauthorized charge, all $52,000, and it gave her 30 days to respond. She opened it while I was at work. By the time I got home, the kitchen was already destroyed." "Is Ellie safe?" I said. "She is in her room. The door is locked. I checked on her 20 minutes ago. She is scared, but she is okay. Dad, I am handling it. I know it does not look like I am handling it, but I am. I am not going to let anything happen to her." I believed him. For the first time in a long time, I heard something in my son's voice that was not fear. It was not courage exactly. It was closer to the sound a piece of wood makes when you bend it to its limit, and it does not break. It holds. It bends and it holds and it finds a strength it did not know it had. I drove to their house anyway. I sat in my truck across the street, with the engine off and the windows down, and I watched the house until every light went out. 11:40. Ellie's bedroom light was the last to go, and I sat there for another 15 minutes after that just to make sure it stayed dark and quiet. Then I drove home. The next morning, Claudette called me at 7. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "I need you to sit down." "I am already sitting," I said. "Margot Price arrived in Savannah last night. She took a flight from Baton Rouge that landed at 11:15. She rented a car at the airport. A black sedan. She checked into the Marriott on Bay Street at 11:52. I know this because I have a contact at the Chatham County Sheriff's Office who has been monitoring her movements since I flagged her name 3 weeks ago. I held the phone and stared at the wall above my bench where Ellie's drawing was pinned. My grandpa. Red crayon. 2 words. Margot was here. The mother. The teacher. The woman who had taken $380,000 from Raymond Fenton and served time and learned nothing except how not to get caught the next time. She was here in my city, 10 minutes from my house, and the clock I had built was ticking. "What do we do?" I said. "We do not change a thing," Claudette said. "We let her come. We let her think she is in control, and we watch every single move she makes." Margot Price came to my house on a Thursday afternoon, January 16th, 2:14 in the afternoon. I know the exact time because the camera above my front porch recorded every second of it. A black rental sedan pulled up to the curb on Abercorn Street, and a woman stepped out and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking up at my house the way a buyer looks at a property she has already decided to purchase. She was tall, thin, late 50s or early 60s with silver blonde hair, cut sharp at the jaw, and sunglasses pushed up on top of her head, even though the January sky was gray and there was no sun to block. She wore a black coat and low heels, and she carried a leather handbag over one shoulder, and she walked up my front steps like she had been here before, even though she had not. I opened the door before she knocked. I wanted her to know I had been watching. "Mr. Mercer," she said. She smiled. It was the kind of smile that had been practiced in a mirror until it looked natural. "My name is Margot Price. I am Jordyn's mother. I believe we have met once before at the wedding, but it has been a few years. May I come in?" I stepped aside. I let her in. Claudette had told me to let her in. Let her talk. Let her think the room belongs to her. People like Margot reveal the most when they believe they are in control. She sat in the armchair by the fireplace. The same chair Rosalind used to sit in on Sunday afternoons, reading novels with her feet tucked under her. Margot crossed her legs and folded her hands on her knee and looked around the room with an expression that was meant to say charming, but actually said inventory. "This is a beautiful home," she said. "How long have you lived here?" 37 years, I said. "That is a long time," she said. "A lot of memories in these walls. It must be hard living here alone after losing Rosalind. I cannot imagine how lonely that must feel." There it was. The first move. 5 seconds in the door and she was already working. Loneliness. Isolation. Vulnerability. She was reading from a script she had used before, and I knew exactly which script it was because Claudette had shown me the court transcripts from Louisiana. Raymond Fenton was 71 years old when Margot found him. A retired electrician in Baton Rouge who had lost his wife to a stroke and was living alone in a house he had built with his own hands. Margot became his neighbor's friend first, then his friend, then his financial advisor, then the woman who controlled his bank accounts and his medical decisions and his daily schedule until there was nothing left of Raymond Fenton except a confused old man sitting in a chair in a house he no longer owned, signing papers, could no longer read. $380,000. That is what she took from him over 23 months. His savings, his pension, the equity in his home. She sold his truck without telling him. She canceled his medical insurance and told him the government had done it. She moved his mail to a post office box registered in the name Linda Marsh so that bank statements and legal notices went to her instead of to him. And when Raymond's nephew finally got suspicious and called the police, Margot told the officers that Raymond had given her the money willingly because he was in love with her and she was just trying to help. The jury did not believe her. She was convicted in 2011. Financial exploitation of an elderly person. She served her sentence and was released, and she moved to Georgia, and she found a new target. My family. My son. My granddaughter. Me. The same script. Different city. Different victim. Same predator. I sat across from Margot in my living room, and I let her talk. She talked for 45 minutes. She told me she was worried about the tension between me and Jordyn. She told me that Jordyn loved me like a father and only wanted what was best for the family. She told me that growing older was nothing to be ashamed of, and that accepting help was a sign of strength, not weakness. She used words like dignity and comfort and peace of mind, and she laid them out on the table between us like jewels in a velvet case, each one polished and positioned to catch the light at exactly the right angle. Then she leaned forward and her voice dropped to something softer and more intimate, and she said, "Edwin, may I call you Edwin? I want you to know that I have experience with these situations. I helped a dear friend of mine in Louisiana navigate his later years, and it brought me so much joy to know that he was taken care of. I would love to do the same for you. Not as a stranger, as family, a dear friend." That is what she called Raymond Fenton. A dear friend she had robbed blind and left with nothing. I looked at her across the room, and I thought about what Rosalind had said on the cassette. They find men like you. Good men. Men who build things. and they take it apart from the inside. They hunt in pairs, mother and daughter, teacher and student. Margot builds the script, and Jordyn performs it. One opens the door, and the other empties the house. And they had been doing this long before they found me. Raymond Fenton was not the first. He was just the first one who got caught. Claudette had told me that during her research she found references to 2 other cases in Louisiana and Mississippi that were investigated but never prosecuted. Different names, different cities, same pattern. An elderly man living alone. A friendly woman who offered to help. A slow, steady disappearance of everything he had. Margot finished her speech. She smiled that practiced smile and stood up and smoothed her coat and said, "I am so glad we had this talk, Edwin. I think we are going to work things out beautifully." I walked her to the door. She stepped onto the porch and turned and looked at me one last time. "Family takes care of family," she said. I closed the door. I locked it. I walked to the kitchen, and I picked up the phone, and I called Claudette. "She was here," I said. The camera got everything, every word, every smile, every lie. Claudette was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke, and her voice had a weight to it that told me something had changed. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "I received a call 30 minutes ago from a retired federal investigator in Baton Rouge. He has been tracking Margot Price for 6 years. He believes she has done this to at least 4 other men, across 3 states. And he wants to talk to you." The Facebook post started on Friday morning, January 17th. I do not use Facebook. Rosalind used to manage a page for the church choir, and sometimes she would show me pictures of Ellie that Nathan posted, but I never had an account of my own. So I did not see what Jordyn wrote until Cordelia called me at 8:30 and said, "Edwin, you need to sit down and let me read you something." She had posted a long message on her personal page. Public. Visible to everyone. She wrote that she was heartbroken to share that her father-in-law, Edwin Mercer, was experiencing severe cognitive decline and that the family was struggling to get him the help he needed. She wrote that he had become paranoid and aggressive and had recently accused her of stealing money, which she described as a delusion caused by his worsening condition. She wrote that she and Nathan had been trying to care for him at home, but that he was becoming a danger to himself and that they were exploring assisted living options for his safety. She ended the post by asking for thoughts and prayers, and for anyone who knew a good elder care attorney to please send her a private message. 14 people shared it within the first hour. 26 comments by noon. Most of them were from people who did not know me. Friends of Jordyn's from her gym and her book club and her social media circles. But a few were from people in the neighborhood. People who had been at the Christmas party, people who had been at the brunch, people who had watched Jordyn hand out that Blue Magnolia Gardens brochure and were now reading her Facebook post and connecting dots that had been carefully arranged to form a picture that was not true. Cordelia read me every word. When she finished, there was a silence on the line that lasted a long time. "That woman," Cordelia said, and then she stopped herself and took a breath. "Edwin, what do you need me to do?" "Nothing yet," I said. "But thank you for calling." I hung up and called Claudette. She already knew. She had seen the post and had already taken screenshots and saved them to the file. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "this is escalation. She is building a public narrative to support a legal action. I expect we will see a guardianship petition within the next 48 hours. She was right. It came the next day, January 18th. Saturday afternoon. A process server knocked on my front door at 1:12 and handed me an envelope with the Chatham County Probate Court seal on it. Inside was a petition for emergency guardianship filed by Jordyn Mercer on behalf of Edwin Mercer. The petition claimed that I was mentally incapacitated and unable to manage my personal and financial affairs. It cited erratic behavior, paranoid accusations, and a refusal to accept medical care. It requested that Jordyn be appointed as my legal guardian, with full authority over my finances, my medical decisions, and my living arrangements. I read it standing in my hallway next to the grandfather clock. The clock ticked steady and calm beside me, the way it had ticked for 32 years. I folded the petition and put it back in the envelope and called Claudette. "We expected this," she said. "We are ready. The hearing is scheduled for January 20th. That gives us 2 days. I have Dr. Marsh's evaluation. I have Douglas's financial report. I have Nathan's recordings. I have the camera footage of Jordyn's threat and Margot's visit. I have Rosalind's cassette. And I have something new." "What is it?" I said. "The retired federal investigator from Baton Rouge. His name is Agent Colvin. He sent me a file this morning. Margot Price is connected to 4 confirmed cases of elder financial exploitation across Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. 2 convictions. 2 cases that were investigated but dropped due to insufficient evidence. Total documented losses across all 4 victims exceed $1.2 million. Agent Colvin is prepared to testify by phone if needed." I stood in the hallway, and I held the phone, and I breathed. $1.2 million. 4 men. 4 lives taken apart piece by piece by a woman who smiled like a neighbor and spoke like a friend and left nothing behind but empty accounts and broken trust. That night I could not sleep. I lay in bed and listened to the house. The grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. The refrigerator humming in the kitchen. The live oak outside brushing its branches against the window, the way it did when the wind came from the east. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. The sounds of a house that had held my family for 37 years. At 2:17 in the morning, the back door alarm went off. I sat up in bed. The alarm was a simple magnetic sensor. Claudette's security company had installed the same day as the cameras. When the back door opened, the sensor broke contact and sent an alert to my phone and to the security company's monitoring center. I grabbed my phone and opened the camera app. The backdoor camera showed a figure standing on my porch. Dark clothing. A hood pulled up. Gloves. The figure was trying the door handle with one hand and holding a phone in the other, the screen glowing blue against the fabric of the hood. The door was locked. The deadbolt held. The figure tried the handle again, then stepped back and looked up, and I saw the face under the hood lit by the phone screen for just a moment. It was not Jordyn. It was not Margot. It was someone I did not recognize. A man. Young. Maybe mid-20s. He looked directly at the camera without knowing it was there, and then he turned and walked quickly down the driveway and got into a car parked on the street with its lights off and drove away. I called the police. Then I called Claudette. Then I called Nathan. The security company had already forwarded the footage to the Chatham County Sheriff's Office. By 3:15 that morning, a deputy named Sheriff Crane was sitting in my kitchen watching the playback on my phone. He was a broad man with a shaved head and calm gray eyes, and he took notes in a small leather notebook and did not interrupt me once while I told him everything. When I finished, he closed his notebook and looked at me. "Mr. Mercer," he said, "I have seen enough. Between the camera footage, the financial documentation your attorney provided, and the guardianship petition filed under what appears to be false pretenses, I am opening a formal investigation. I am also going to request that a judge issue a protective order for you and your granddaughter effective immediately." He stood up and shook my hand. "You built a solid case," he said. "Every piece fits." I looked at him, and for the first time in 3 weeks, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief. Not yet. Something closer to the feeling you get when you have been holding a heavy beam above your head for hours and you finally hear the support column click into place beneath it. The weight does not disappear, but you know it is not going to fall. The hearing was in 2 days. Everything was ready. January 20th. 9 o'clock in the morning. Chatham County Probate Court. Room 314. I wore the same suit I wore to Rosalind's funeral. Dark navy. White shirt. The tie she bought me for our 35th anniversary. Deep red with a thin silver stripe that she said made me look like a man who knew what he was doing, even when he did not. I tied it in a Windsor knot, the way my father taught me, and I looked at myself in the mirror, and I thought, you are 65 years old, and you are about to walk into a courtroom and fight for the right to live in your own house and make your own decisions and love your granddaughter without someone else's permission. And then I thought, Rosalind, if you can hear me, I could really use that strength of yours right about now. Claudette met me in the hallway outside the courtroom. She was carrying a leather briefcase that I knew contained everything. Every document, every recording, every photograph and financial statement and camera still. Dr. Marsh's evaluation, Agent Colvin's federal file, and the second cassette tape. She looked at me and said, "Are you ready?" I said, "I have been ready since Christmas Eve." The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood-paneled walls, fluorescent lights that hummed the way cheap fixtures always hum. 4 rows of bench seating behind a low railing. The judge's bench was elevated at the front, dark oak, and I noticed that the grain was quarter-sawn white oak, good quality, the kind of wood that holds its shape over time and does not warp under pressure. I do not know why I noticed that. Maybe because noticing wood is how I steady myself when the rest of the world feels unsteady. Jordyn sat at a table on the left side of the room with her attorney, a man in a gray suit whose name I never bothered to learn. She was dressed like a concerned daughter-in-law. Soft pink blouse, pearl earrings, hair down, hands folded on the table. She looked at me once when I walked in, and her expression was carefully arranged into something that was meant to look like compassion, but landed closer to performance. Margot sat in the front row behind Jordyn. Black dress, silver hair, straight back, watching everything with the patient attention of someone who had been in rooms like this before and knew how the script was supposed to go. Nathan sat behind me on my side of the room. He had Ellie with him. She was wearing her school clothes and holding Mr. Buttons on her lap, and when she saw me she waved with her fingers close together the way children wave when they are trying to be quiet. I waved back. The judge entered. Her name was Judge Amara Whitfield. She was a black woman in her late 50s with reading glasses on a chain and a voice that carried the kind of authority that does not need volume to be felt. She sat down and opened the file and read the petition silently for 2 minutes. And then she looked up and asked Jordyn's attorney to present his case. He spoke for 20 minutes. He described me as a grieving widower in cognitive decline who had become paranoid and irrational, and who had made unfounded accusations against his loving daughter-in-law. He presented the Facebook post as evidence of community concern. He referenced the Blue Magnolia Gardens brochure as proof that the family had been researching appropriate care options. He asked the court to appoint Jordyn as my legal guardian for my own protection and well-being. When he finished, the room was quiet. Judge Whitfield looked at Claudette. "Your response, counselor." Claudette stood up. She did not rush. She buttoned her jacket and placed both hands on the table, and she spoke the way she always spoke, clear and steady and precise, like every word had been measured before it was cut. "Your Honor," she said, "my client Edwin Mercer is not in cognitive decline. He is not paranoid. He is not irrational. He is a 65-year-old retired master clockmaker who has lived independently in the same home for 37 years. And who is the victim of a deliberate and documented pattern of financial exploitation by the petitioner and her bomb god, Mother Margot Price." She opened the briefcase. Over the next 40 minutes, Claudette presented everything. She started with Dr. Marsh's evaluation, which stated that I was in excellent cognitive and physical health with no signs of impairment. She presented Douglas's financial report documenting $52,000 in unauthorized charges and the fraudulently obtained BMW lease. She played 3 of Nathan's 52 recordings, in which Jordyn discussed stealing from me and threatening Nathan with custody if he spoke up. She showed the camera footage of Jordyn on my porch saying, "You just started a war." She showed the footage of Margot sitting in my living room, using the same language and techniques documented in the Raymond Fenton case. She presented Agent Colvin's file connecting Margot to 4 cases across 3 states, totaling $1.2 million in losses. She showed the break-in footage from 2:17 in the morning. Jordyn's attorney objected 6 times. Judge Whitfield overruled every single one. Then Claudette reached into the briefcase and pulled out a cassette player. The same silver Sony from 1989. She placed it on the table and looked at the judge. "Your Honor," she said, "I would like to play one final piece of evidence. This is a recording made by Rosalind Mercer, the respondent's late wife, approximately 14 months before her death. She recorded it because she discovered the petitioner's pattern of financial abuse, and she wanted to ensure that her husband would be protected after she was gone." Claudette pressed play. Rosalind's voice filled the courtroom. "This is Rosalind Mercer," she said. "I am recording this because I need someone to hear the truth, in case I am not here to say it myself. My husband Edwin is the sharpest, kindest, most capable man I have ever known. He is not losing his mind. He is not confused. He is not helpless. He is a man who trusts his family, and that trust is being used against him. I have watched my daughter-in-law Jordyn take money from our accounts for over a year. I have documented everything I could find, and I have given it to our attorney, Claudette Fontenot. If someone is standing in a courtroom right now trying to take away Edwin's rights, I need you to know that they are lying. My husband does not need a guardian. He needs justice. And if I know Edwin, and I do, he has already built his case the way he builds everything, with patience and precision and love. Please protect him the way he spent 40 years protecting me." The tape clicked, and the courtroom was silent. I looked at Jordyn. Her carefully arranged expression was gone. In its place was something raw and exposed like a wall that has been stripped down to the framing. Her attorney was staring at his notes. Margot had not moved, but her hands in her lap were no longer still. They were gripping each other so tight her knuckles had gone white. Judge Whitfield removed her glasses. She looked at the petition. She looked at Jordyn. She looked at me. "This petition is denied," she said. "Denied, in its entirety." The arrests happened fast. Sheriff Crane was waiting in the hallway when the courtroom doors opened. He had 2 deputies with him, and a woman in a dark blue jacket who I later learned was a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation field office in Savannah. They stood in a line against the wall like a fence that had been built while no one was looking, and now there was no way around it. Jordyn walked out first. She was walking fast with her head down, and her attorney half a step behind her, reaching for her elbow and saying something about an appeal. She did not see Sheriff Crane until he stepped forward and said, "Jordyn Mercer, I need you to stop right there." She stopped. She looked at him the way a person looks at a locked door when they are certain they have the key. Confused. Impatient. Still believing that this was something she could talk her way through. "Jordyn Mercer," Sheriff Crane said, "you are under arrest for financial exploitation of an elderly person, identity theft, and fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." He kept talking. The full statement. Every word measured and clear, the way law enforcement delivers words they have said hundreds of times, but never casually. Jordyn's face went white. Not the white of fear. The white of something deeper. The white of a person watching a building collapse and realizing they are standing inside it. Her attorney stepped forward and said, "My client has no comment at this time." Sheriff Crane nodded, and the deputies moved in, and one of them put handcuffs on Jordyn's wrists in the hallway of the Chatham County Courthouse, while 14 people watched, including Nathan, who was standing 10 feet away holding Ellie's hand. Ellie looked up at her father. Nathan looked down at her, and I could see his jaw working and his eyes filling, and I could see him trying to find a way to explain to an 8-year-old why her mother was being led away in handcuffs. He knelt down and said something in her ear that I could not hear. And Ellie nodded once, and pressed Mr. Buttons against her chest, and did not cry. That girl. That brave, unbreakable girl. Margot did not make it to the hallway. The federal agent intercepted her inside the courtroom. I was still sitting at the table with Claudette when I heard it happen behind me. The agent's voice was low and professional, and she identified herself and read Margot her rights. And Margot stood there with her silver hair and her black dress and her practiced posture, and she said nothing. Not one word. She had been through this before. She knew how it worked. She knew that speaking was the only mistake left to make, and she was not going to make it. They searched her hotel room at the Marriott on Bay Street that afternoon. Sheriff Crane called Claudette at 4:30 with the results. Inside Margot's suitcase, they found $40,000 in cash, wrapped in plastic bags, and stored inside a garment bag between two winter coats. They found a leather notebook with a burgundy cover, and what was in that notebook changed everything. Names, addresses, ages, estimated net worth, medical conditions, marital status, living alone or with family, each entry written in Margot's handwriting, small and precise. The handwriting of a woman who kept records the way a hunter keeps a map of where the animals drink. 17 names, 17 men, spread across 5 states: Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina. Some of the names had check marks next to them. Some had dollar amounts. Some had notes like widower, no children, or early dementia easy, and one that said house paid off, trust accessible through daughter. Claudette read me the list over the phone. I sat in my workshop and listened, and each name landed in my chest like a nail driven into green wood. 17 men. 17 lives targeted by a woman who had turned loneliness and grief into a business model. Some of those men had been robbed. Some were probably still being robbed and did not know it. Some were probably dead. The Federal Bureau of Investigation took the notebook. Agent Colvin flew in from Baton Rouge the next day and spent 3 hours at the Savannah Field Office Cross, referencing Margot's list with open cases across the Southeast. Within 48 hours, the Bureau had confirmed active investigations connected to 6 of the 17 names. 6 families who were going to get a phone call that would break their hearts and save their futures at the same time. On the evening of January 21st, Claudette came to my house. She sat at the kitchen table and she put a white envelope on the surface between us and said, "This arrived at my office this morning by certified mail from Baton Rouge." I opened it. Inside was a single handwritten letter on lined paper. The handwriting was shaky, the letters uneven, written by a hand that was old and tired, but determined to say what needed to be said. "Dear Mr. Mercer, my name is Raymond Fenton. I am 78 years old. I understand that you are the man who helped put Margot Price back where she belongs, and I wanted to write to you because I have spent 6 years waiting for someone to do what I could not do alone. She took everything from me. My money, my house, my dignity. She sat in my living room and called me her dear friend, and I believed her because I was lonely and I missed my wife, and I wanted to believe that someone cared. By the time I understood what she had done, it was too late. I lost $380,000. But the thing I lost that hurt the most was my trust. My ability to believe that people are good. You gave that back to me today. I do not know you, sir. But I know what you did, and I know what it cost you. And I want you to know that somewhere in Baton Rouge there is an old man sitting in a small apartment who is grateful beyond words. God bless you and your family. Raymond Fenton." I put the letter down on the table. I looked at Claudette. She was looking at me with those dark, steady eyes, and she did not say anything because there was nothing to say. Some letters do not need a response. They just need to be received and held and placed somewhere safe where they can do their quiet work. I folded Raymond's letter and put it in the inside pocket of my vest, next to my heart, where the broken glass from the first clock used to press against my chest. This time it did not hurt. The sentencing came in early March. Jordyn received 18 months of supervised probation, full restitution of $52,000, and a restraining order that prohibited her from coming within 500 feet of me, my house, or my workshop. Her attorney argued for leniency, and the judge granted it on the condition that Jordyn complete a financial crimes awareness program and submit to monthly check-ins with a probation officer for the full 18 months. She stood in the courtroom with her hands at her sides and her eyes on the floor, and she said nothing when the sentence was read. I do not know what she was thinking. I stopped trying to read her a long time ago. Margot's case went federal. Agent Colvin and the Bureau built a case that stretched across 5 states, and when the full scope of it became clear, the United States Attorney's Office took over. The last I heard from Claudette was that Margot was facing multiple counts of wire fraud, identity theft, and elder financial exploitation, with potential sentences that could keep her behind bars for the rest of her natural life. The burgundy notebook with 17 names became the centerpiece of the prosecution. 6 of those 17 families had already been contacted by the Bureau, and 4 of them had filed victim impact statements. Nathan filed for divorce on January 28th. He did not tell me he was going to do it. He just did it. He called me that evening and said, "Dad, I signed the papers today," and his voice was calm and clear, and I could hear Ellie in the background laughing at something on television, and I thought, that is the sound of a house that is healing. The court granted Nathan full custody of Ellie. Sole legal and physical custody. Jordyn was allowed supervised visitation twice a month at a neutral location, but as of the time I am telling you this story, she has not requested a single visit. I do not know what that means, and I am not going to pretend I do. Some things are between a mother and whatever is left of her conscience. Nathan and Ellie moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on East Liberty Street, 12 minutes from my house. Close enough that Ellie can ride her bicycle to my workshop on Saturday mornings, which she does every single week without exception. She shows up at 9 with her helmet on crooked and Mr. Buttons stuffed in her backpack, and she climbs onto the stool next to my bench and says, "What are we building today, Grandpa?" On February 14th, Ellie brought me a Valentine. She made it at school. Red construction paper folded in half, with a heart drawn in glitter glue on the front and inside in her handwriting, which was getting better every month. It said, "You are the best grandpa in the whole world, and I love you bigger than a clock." I pinned it to the wall next to her drawing, my grandpa in red crayon. "And I love you bigger than a clock" in purple marker. The 2 most important pieces of art I have ever owned. I started building the 3rd clock in late February. Cherry wood again, because cherry is what you use when you are building something meant to last. This one was different from the first 2. The first clock was made with love. The second was made with purpose. This 3rd one was made with peace. I carved it slow. No deadline. No urgency. Just a man in his workshop with a piece of wood and a lifetime of knowing what to do with it. I made the case 12 inches tall with a curved top and a face inlaid with mother-of-pearl numbers I cut by hand. I set a chime mechanism inside that played the first 8 bars of Claire de Lune, the same melody that had been silenced on Christmas Eve, now rebuilt and retuned and ringing clear as morning. And on the back panel, I carved 5 names. Edwin, Rosalind, Nathan, Ellie, and at the bottom, smaller than the others but no less important, Raymond. On a Sunday morning in late March, I placed the 3rd clock on the mantel in my living room. The same mantel where Rosalind used to set fresh flowers every week. The same mantel I had built with my own hands 36 years ago from reclaimed heart pine. I pulled out of a barn in Effingham County. I wound the clock and set the time and stood there and listened to it tick. And for the first time in a very long time, the house sounded whole. That evening I went to the back room. I sat down at the piano bench. I opened the lid, and I took out the 3rd cassette tape, the one labeled in Rosalind's cursive. "Play this one last. My love." I put it in the silver Sony, and I pressed play. Static. A breath. And then her voice. Softer this time. Slower. The voice of a woman who is tired and knows she is running out of time, but has one more thing she needs to say. "Edwin, if you are listening to this, then everything worked. The trust is safe. The house is safe. Ellie is safe. And you are still standing in our kitchen being stubborn and strong and wonderful the way you have been every single day since I met you in that hardware store on Broughton Street when you were 23 years old and you asked me if I needed help carrying a bag of nails. And I said I can carry my own nails, thank you very much. And you laughed. And I thought, well, there is the man I am going to marry. I laughed. Standing alone in the room where she used to play piano, I laughed out loud for the first time in months, and it felt like a window opening in a room that had been closed too long. "I do not have much time left," she said. "But I need you to know something. You did not just protect our family, Edwin. You showed them what it looks like to be strong without being cruel, to fight without losing who you are. That is the greatest thing a man can build. Not a clock, not a house. A legacy of love that no one can take apart. Keep building, sweetheart. Keep making beautiful things. And when Ellie sits on that stool and asks you what you are making, tell her you are making something that will last, because that is what you have always done. And that is why I loved you. Every single day. Even now." The tape ended. The room was quiet. The clock on the mantel chimed once, and the first notes of Claire de Lune drifted through the house like sunlight through curtains. And I closed my eyes, and I let it play. Some things are built to last. Some things cannot be broken. And some melodies, no matter how many times they are silenced, will always find their way back. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone you love. And if you know an elder in your life who might need protecting, do not wait. Build your case. Lock your doors. And trust that love, even from the other side, will always show you the way.